Josh, in week 10, I acted like a maniac in my living room. And I don't know if I'll have to do that in week 11. I'll be at US Bank Stadium, but I'm a usually calm marshmallow type of dude. How do you personally react during a game like that, which is nearly unforeseen in the annals of Vikings regular season history?
I'll be honest with you. I typically do the same thing. I'm pretty controlled during a game. I think I yelled at my TV about 4 or 5 times in this one. That
Yeah.
between the Justin Jefferson catch that I thought was an interception at first, and then it turns out he catches that with his one hand, and then the Kirk Cousins QB sneak at the end zone that I thought was in, and then it wasn't in, and then thought it was in again, and then it wasn't in again, and then the Eric Hendricks fumble at the end of that fourth quarter, the cover for the touchdown. That was just an incredible game throughout that entire game. Like, yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how they exactly came out with that one as a win. Like, that was insane.
Yeah, there's so many things that would be standalone. Do you remember this moment? Like looking back, whether it was like Diggs's reception or the missed Gabriel Davis incompletion, that we would either lift up or bemoan, 7 weeks after. But we're gonna forget about all those moments because there was so many. And I'm like just a serene type dude. I get it from my grandpa on my mom's side, where I don't get very rattled. But during Vikings games, I don't get angry. I don't punch walls. But when I get excited, I act like a third grader. And so for this game, it was like uncontrollable bliss in those moments that you talked about because they were so unforeseen, especially when you've been doing this for 26 years watching the Vikings and you just expect the worst shit to happen.
Yeah, no, this is a game you go back 2020, 2021, even 2019, you could argue like this is a game that they definitely would not have won under any circumstance. Like between 4th and 18, Justin Jefferson making that incredible catch, probably one of the greatest catches we've ever seen in NFL history. Then the QB sneak, they get that touchdown, and then they allowed Buffalo to go all the way down the field, kick that game tying field goal, and they still come out in overtime. They go down the field again, and they don't get the touchdown again, and they have to kick that field goal. Buffalo's driving on the other end, and Patrick Peterson, even Duke Shelley making plays. Patrick Peterson gets that game sealing interception. Like, man, yeah, like you said, there's just so many moments that we can go back to and just look, damn, how the hell did that happen?
I'm with you on the quarterback sneak. So that's a new play with the frequency in which they use it. Because Zimmer didn't like to do it. Every once in a while he'd do it, and it was kind of just bound not to work at some point because I think they were about 5 for 5 until Sunday. And
Well, even I was nervous about that just because like Blake Brandel's in at left tackle
yeah,
rather than Christian Darrisaw. Like you get Buffalo's edge rushers against a backup left tackle like that
mm-hmm.
on a play where you know what they're gonna do, and that was definitely a nerve wracking one for me. I thought he was in, but I guess he didn't break the goal line, but yeah, that was a tough one for sure.
And I hope they keep using that play
Oh yeah,
because Kirk isn't humongous, but he's also not tiny.
yeah.
Sometimes I guess his stature might feel tiny because he's not 6'5" like his counterpart was, Josh Allen on Sunday. But that play usually nets dividends, so I have no qualms with that. That is the play call, and it just seemed by a whisker he didn't get it, and we shall see on it going forward. But what I talked about, I think with Bryant McKinney the other night, Monday night, was it really feels to me, and I'm self-professed Vikings optimist, except for during games. Then I start to become self-professed Vikings cynic. But it seems like if they can win in Buffalo, they can win anywhere, and therefore the limit now, the ceiling is a Super Bowl appearance, if not Super Bowl win. And you've been kind of hinting at that for a couple of weeks, even before me. What does your outlook? How does that change now that they can win in Buffalo?
I think it's reinforced even more than it has been for the entire season. Like I don't think there's any team, if you can go into Buffalo like that and win like that where nothing's really going your way. The refereeing, there was some awful plays again where the refs just flat out miss stuff, and then you miss an extra point and you
Mm-hmm.
still come out and win this game. Like, I don't think there's going to be, that's probably the toughest challenge you're going to face the entire season, like until the playoffs, obviously. But throughout this regular season, like there's no tougher challenge than that.
How much of a leash do you give the kicker? Some of the emails that I get for the mailbag are not fond of him, and I say a couple things. he really hasn't been horrendous. He hasn't cost us a game, trying to, be uplifting here. And then, we got to learn our lesson. We got rid of Daniel Carlson, although that was a different story because he was brand new and a rookie. But at what point would you go look at some ho-hum free agent kicker? Are you there, or do you want to maybe go until mid-December, or where are we at?
So we've got 6 straight games now that are all indoors, right?
Mm-hmm.
All on turf and indoors. So I think you get through that, especially at least 3 weeks into it. And if he starts hitting these kicks again, then yeah, then you're totally fine. He's probably back on track. It was just a weird streak for him over the past few weeks. But if this continues, one, I have some hope just because the Vikings have been able to win games despite Greg Joseph missing kicks all season. So if they're used to that, then I mean it's less of a worry than if you go into the playoffs and he misses a kick and they had never experienced that for the entire season. Like I'd be a lot more worried in that situation. But again, like you're gonna get into some of these games. You got potentially San Francisco, Philly again. Like you're going to need all the points that you can get in those games against those defenses. And if Greg Joseph continues to miss kicks, like at some point you got to go look at somebody because there's guys out there that can hit these kicks. They've done it before, but yeah, this is getting a little bit concerning at this point.
One thing that I will, if you're pro Joseph, the viewers, I would say is let's suggest that you think he's a good kicker. Well, mathematically, from 50 and beyond, or even the missed extra points, mathematically, he's due to stop it. Like the law of averages says that, he hit 7 of 9 from 50 and beyond last year. And this year he's 1 for whatever, or is it 0 for whatever? I can't even remember.
0 for.
Yeah, 0 for whatever. If you indeed believe that he's just not some Blair Walsh lost cause, then he should be sitting on about 6 in a row. That's typically how, good players, rectify their sins. Now, the extra points, that should have been corrected like 2 weeks ago. But that gives me hope. And I'm not 100% down on the dumps on him. I wouldn't, if we got an alert in 10 minutes that said that Vikings signed blah, blah, blah as a kicker, I wouldn't be upset. But I just think that I still, for some reason, have a comfort level with him that maybe he can turn this around. And it could be foolish, but I learned my lesson with Daniel Carlson because just like the rest of the world, when he looked like an utter doofus in week 2 of 2018, I was like, yeah, we got the wrong guy. And that was emphatically false. Where do you draw the line?
It's tough because, like you said, last year he was really good. He was basically automatic, and then going into training camp, he was automatic too. Like this is just a weird 5-6 week stretch for him where it's just miss kick after miss kick, extra points. Like that should have been something that you corrected last year. Like you didn't. He missed like what 3 or 4 of those last year, and yeah, it's like. These are kicks that should be automatic for anybody, and they have been for most kickers throughout the entire season. So yeah, this is tough. But again, as soon as you get somebody, you let him go. He's going to go sign with somebody else, and he's going to start hitting these 60-yarders again. And it's going to be like, well, what the hell did we just do? Why did we let that guy go? So yeah, I really don't know where to draw the line at this point because this is just a really tough spot for anybody to be in.
I hear you. So the Dalvin Cook arguably saved the game with a Adrian Peterson-ish touchdown, the longest for Vikings anybody's scoring touchdown since 2012. Go figure. And it seems like they curiously didn't use him much until they were kind of like, all right, well, maybe they won't be expecting a run here. And boom, he hits an 81-yard home run. Is this pass first coach not realizing that Dalvin Cook should be used in the first and second quarters? Or is this just the way it is with a pass first offense that the running back is kind of a footnote?
I think it's a little bit of both. I would like him to start using Dalvin Cook a little bit more than he has because obviously Cook's proven throughout the season that he's still got it. He's still got it in those legs. Like that 81 touchdown run was just that was an incredible run, and he's definitely got that burst in him still. So I definitely like him to use him a little bit more, especially on that 3rd and 1 and then that 4th and 1 where they don't even use him at all. They're trying to get chunk plays throughout that entire time. Like at least run it once. Or they targeted I think it was KJ Osborne on that 4th and 1. That seemed like the perfect play to use like TJ Hawkinson in that situation. To get a couple yards, hit a 6'5" guy rather than the 6'2", 180-pound receiver or whatever he is. So I Yeah, it's definitely getting to the point where it's weird how they've been playing in some of these situations, but I think moving forward, you definitely have to use Dalvin Cook a lot more than what they've had so far this year.
On that 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, I was laughing, because everybody's bemoaning it, and I kind of was thinking everybody wants pass first head coach until you get a pass first head coach,
Yep.
and this is the byproduct. I think what they should do in those situations where they're either on their own 40 or on the opponent's 40 and in between, that if it's 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 1, damn well O'Connell's going to pull the trigger. You might as well give it to Dalvin on 3rd and 1, and
Right.
then have your Hawkinson play on 4th and 1 instead of getting cute, because he loves to take those stabs on 3rd and 1 to Jefferson deep or
Yeah.
anybody deep. They love doing that, which is fine usually. And this was a classic. If it worked, then nobody cares. But
Yeah.
it was kind of like the Seahawks, running it on the goal line or whatever it was. I want to ask you before we move on to Dallas, and this is kind of a pivot to Dallas, is these injuries that are mounting are a little concerning. We've kind of just put the ones to bed, like Irv Smith and Lewis Seen. Those are a big deal, but nobody cares anymore because they're water under the bridge. But then Dalvin Tomlinson and Cameron Dantzler are week to week. And then during the Bills game, Darisaw went missing. Hawkinson was gone for a little bit. Evans out with a concussion. So what do you, Darisaw, do you think Darisaw, are these things that we have to, wait for the injury report to say, is this going to be a severely hampered team against Dallas? Or do you think those are just one-offs and they'll be back?
Well, I do think with Darisaw, I'm not entirely sure, so we probably just have to wait for the injury report on that. But it looked like a Caleb Evans was like posting on Twitter and Instagram and stuff after the game. So I'm assuming that he's probably okay, because if he actually got a concussion, like I'm sure the trainers wouldn't have allowed him to be looking at his phone and
Yeah.
all those screens and stuff. So I'm guessing that Evans is probably going to be back this week. Darisaw, I don't know much of anything about at this point. But I will say Blake Brandel,
Yeah.
man. That was an incredible game from Blake Brandel. I think he had like an 80 PFF grade in terms of pass blocking. Like against that defense to put up that performance when you haven't really played at all this season, that was great. Like that's exactly what the Vikings needed him to do in that situation, and he got the job done. Like
Yeah.
credit to him. Because
Yeah.
so if they have to run him out there again, obviously you're worried about Micah Parsons,
Mhm.
because that's probably a caliber of player that this Vikings defense or this Vikings offensive line has not played against this season. He's one of the top 5 defenders in this entire NFL. So I'd be worried about that. But pretty much anything else, you have to throw out Blake Brandel again, I'd be okay with it.
He played so competently that after Darisaw went out and Cousins actually had pretty good protection for most of the day, I kept looking, I'm like, is Darisaw back in?
Yeah.
How is this working? And I'd go look, I'd be like, no, that guy looks white. I think that's Brandel. And that's just what I kept thinking. And that's a testament to him for that. Yeah, I agree on Evans. He's probably a shoe in to go. It sounds like, well, we know Dantzler's at least 3 more games. Tomlinson is still week to week. Hopefully he's back. But yeah, kind of quietly, they beat the Bills with a bunch of injuries, and the Bills had a bunch of injuries too. But against Dallas, we'll make that our official pivot. A team that has won 3 straight times at US Bank Stadium. What's your general temperature? I think I know your prediction, but do they spook you? Because they're I wouldn't say they're desperate, but if they want to really nail down a upper echelon playoff seed, they got to win.
Yeah, I think this is a team that, especially going into this week, like they should scare anybody, because that Green Bay game was ugly down the stretch. Gave up 17 unanswered points in the fourth quarter and overtime. The offense just looked anemic throughout that entire fourth quarter. Defense didn't do anything. Like they were giving Rodgers all sorts of time to throw the ball. Christian Watson burned them after basically being non-existent for most of the season. He had 3 touchdowns in this game. So if there's ever going to be a week where Dallas should come out motivated on both sides of the field, this is the week for them to do it. Especially Eagles lost last weekend. They're sort of seeing an opportunity where, hey, if we start going on a winning streak here, maybe we can actually come out with this NFC East thing. But at the end of the day, the Vikings have proven that they're going to come out on a weekly basis too, and they're going to be fired up to win games, because if they weren't, they wouldn't be on a 7-game winning streak right now, and they wouldn't be 8-1 on top of the NFC. But yeah, this is a game that I think is going to end up coming down to the wire. And again, the Vikings might need a couple more of these breaks to fall their way in order to make it happen. But I think this is a team they've proven that they can get the job done, and I think they do it again this week.
Yep, and they have the Vikings number in that building, albeit one of the
Oh yeah.
games was without fans in 2020. It was still disappointing. The thing that what happens when you beat Buffalo or you win on the road at Miami or you win in Washington is that these games, although I don't have this like broad array of confidence the Vikings are going to win, like, I'm bragging about it. I'm just not concerned. Like, I know the Cowboys are good. I know they've got talent everywhere. They rebuilt a defense like with one draft in 2021, but because this group is resilient, battle tested, optimistic, like in love with one another, I'm like, bring on the Cowboys. Or even, I think I said this on a radio show on Monday morning, in a Rochester radio show, is that even if the Packers have a resurgence and those bastards somehow get the 7th seed, I'm like, bring them on. Isn't that weird? Because usually we're thinking like, oh God, we're gonna get the Packers in the playoffs, and we know how that's gonna go. So it must be a testament to the culture or something that I don't feel negative Nancy stuff. Are you the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about this yesterday on Purple PTSD. There's no reason the Vikings shouldn't lose at least one of these next two games.
Yeah.
Like Dallas is going to come out fired up. Then you got New England 4 days later on Thanksgiving night. Like Bill Belichick, they're coming off a bye this week too, so they're going to be rested. They're going to be basically fully healthy for that game, hopefully. And I mean, there's no reason that the Vikings shouldn't lose. But if they go 2-1 or 3-0 in this stretch, that's going to be the most impressive thing that anybody has done throughout this entire season. And if they do that, then they should be the Super Bowl favorites at this point, because they've proven once again that they can hang with anybody in this league.
It should be. I read that article. It was excellent on PPTSD. It should be a cautionary tale that because the Vikings have stacked so many wins, that if they do, take a dump against the Cowboys or lose against Patriots or the Jets, I know that just the way that the digital age works, it'll be I knew they were frauds from some folks, but it doesn't have to be that way. The Eagles just lost the Commanders, a scrappy Commanders team that is not as talented. And I think because me and Kluwer are getting so used to winning that the knee-jerk reaction, if they lost 20-17 against the Cowboys, would be like, well, here we go. We lost at home. And I don't think we need to feel that way anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, you look at the national media, like the Eagles lost. Nobody's talking about it though. Like they've just bought themselves a cushion with everybody, I guess. Meanwhile, the Vikings go and beat Buffalo on the road, and everybody's like, oh, they're frauds still. They managed to barely pull that one out, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it's just like the Eagles. If they lose this week, there's no reason to freak out. They're still at least 4.5 games up on the NFC North. They've got a magic number of 4, and they can basically clinch this division title in any 2 given weeks. Like they don't need to go on a huge stretch down the road. And I mean, honestly, I'd be totally fine if they feel like they're super banged up over these next 2 weeks. Rest some of these guys an extra week just to make sure that they're healthy for the playoff run. I don't care about a regular season game. Granted, Thursday night, Thanksgiving night, everybody's going to be watching. It'd be awesome to win that game. But if it means they rest some of these guys and they're healthy for mid-January, I'd care way more about that than I do winning on Thanksgiving.
You're talking about the Tomlinsons and
right,
the questionable guys. Okay.
Yeah.
I see. All right. Well, I want to ask you one thing before we get off air, and that is about the quarterback. He had 2 dreadful interceptions that, from my vantage point, were his fault and nobody else's. And a lot of times with anybody's interceptions, especially Cousins, because he's usually pretty particular about where he throws the ball, you're like, oh, somebody must have messed up that route. I think he had 2 bad interceptions. He rectified them. And we have teased Kirk Vember getting wins, but we've teased statistical Kirk Vember, and it's not to the degree that we thought we'd see. So do you think that this brand of Cousins, just the guy who wins, almost Eli Manning-ish in getting the W's, not stuffing a stat sheet, is this the new norm for the rest of the season? There's half of it left. Or because we have 6 indoor games upcoming, do we now see the guy who throws 3 touchdowns, 298 yards, 0 picks, and he does that? Or do we have to put up with winning and a diminished Cousins statistical box score?
I definitely think it can be both, especially over these next 6 weeks. Like some of the games where he's flat out struggled, like it's still, again, we've talked about this throughout the entire season. It's been against some of the top defenses in the entire NFL, like Philly, Washington, Buffalo. Those are no jokes throughout this entire league. And the fact that they're winning these games, like that's great enough. But I think over these next 6 weeks, you're gonna get a little bit more of that old Cousins where he's letting it rip and he's hitting JJ for a 50-yard touchdown, and they're putting up some of these numbers that we've seen throughout the entire league. Granted, maybe it's not going to be like as much as we saw in like 2020 and 2021 because they're playing from behind so often, and maybe they can afford to run the ball a little bit more and just run out some of the clock, just playing some competitive football. But I do think that we're going to eventually see a regression to the mean with Cousins, where he's starting to put up some more of these 300-yard, 3 touchdown performances.
Some of his improv skills in the pocket have been so much better than years past. And it's weird because in years past, he had a lot more pressure because the offensive line wasn't quite as good. But when he first got here, my wife used to say, why does he do that? Talking about like the little turtle going into the shell. Like when things got rough, he'd go like that and then just take a sack. Well, now he's certainly not a Lamar Jackson type, but the way that he's navigating the pocket is so improved from the first 5 games when he got here. And I think it's here to stay. I think it's growth.
Yeah, some of the windows that he was throwing into on Sunday, like I don't know how he fit the ball. That one where he was basically on his back as he was releasing the ball, like I don't know how he's pulling some of these throws out of his ass, but I'm here for it. I'm here for it every single week. If he continues to do this, and like you said, some of this ability to just move up and down throughout the pocket, like this is some stuff that we've never seen out of Kirk Cousins before. And I think this is the evolution that Kevin O'Connell was talking about before the season started in training camp. And then you listen to Kirk Cousins before the season too, where he's talking about how he's kind of nervous about making some of these throws that he normally wouldn't make, but now he's doing it and it's working. And it's awesome to see. And I'm looking forward to seeing it continue to happen throughout the rest of the year.
And one thing we said throughout the summer when we were forecasting and foreshadowing this O'Connell offense was, hey, if you want Cousins to be a mini gunslinger, you're going to have the picks. There's going to be more interceptions. And he had those 2 nearly inexcusable ones against the Bills, but that's the cost of doing business. If you want the guy to take more chances, unfortunately, there's going to be a couple more turnovers. It doesn't really matter because the Vikings are 8-1 in terms of the more turnovers. He's not fumbling like a madman. That was his big problem when he was younger. All right, sir, I have 27-20 Vikings. I am confident they'll win another 1-score game and extend their glorious 1-score margin win streak. What do you got?
I've got 27-24 Vikings. So maybe we see a game-winning Greg Joseph field goal and we can finally put some of these kicking problems to rest here.
How far out, whether the game on the line or otherwise, what do you think O'Connell's limit is now? 55, 56, or do you think that he's done with that for a while?
I don't think he's gonna. I think if you see it under 60, I think he's gonna run him out there. I think he's gonna show some confidence in Joseph, and maybe that's what he needs. He needs his head coach to show some confidence in him because obviously in the past Mike Zimmer wasn't exactly kind to some of his kickers that he had especially down the stretch of his tenure in Minnesota. But if these guys continue to give Joseph some good vibes, run him out there, I think eventually he's gonna break out of this streak. So hopefully he does it this week.
All right, sir. Fried chicken, FREYED _chicken on Twitter, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Daily work, multiple pieces at purpleptsd.com. All right, we'll talk to you next Wednesday. Proverbial, either talking about the 9-1 Vikings or doing damage control on the 8-2 Vikings.
Sounds great, man.
All right, later. Skol, baby.